It was a stormy Thursday night, and Nigel the Plastic Horse was doing his usual duty then of standing outside the paint shop. Nigel hated Thursdays. Thursday was late night shopping, and this meant he had to stand outside pretending to be a statue for longer. Nigel couldn't fathom why anyone wanted to buy paint at 9:30 on a Thursday night. When I asked Alan the shopkeeper this question, the reply was,
"No, we don't sell croissants here, but there's a butcher down the road you could try. Yar."
Alan's hearing wasn't the best, and neither was his sight, but he had been kind enough to give Nigel a job and a home at the paint shop. The night wore on, and nobody walked into the lonely little paint shop. Finally, Alan came out and told Nigel he was locking up for the night. As Alan walked away into the night, wearing his oversized yellow raincoat, Nigel went out the back to collect his food package that was left there daily by Clive the Turtle. At school, they'd been considered outcasts because Nigel had abnormal allergies and Clive had anger management problems. As he ate macaroni and cheese in front of the window, Nigel thought about how he came to be living in a paint shop owned by a man who pretty much couldn't see or hear. It had all started at school, just before the end of year graduation. In the spring of 1997, Nigel and Clive walked to school through the daisy fields, despite Nigel's allergies that made him sneeze a lava-like substance that severely burnt anything it touched. But Nigel's allergies did not faze him, as he had taken a hay fever tablet that would allow him to make hay of every day. As Nigel and Clive walked through the front gate, they went to look at the graduation awards list, and saw that Nigel had won Ducks of the School. After literally jumping with joy for 10 minutes,
Woohoo! Woohoo!
the pair turned to see Giovanni the parrot coming towards them.
Oh.
Nigel disliked Giovanni. Giovanni constantly teased Nigel and rubbed it in whenever he beat Nigel academically. The teasing worsened when Nigel accidentally sneezed on Giovanni's tail feathers, causing them to shrivel up like a fish in the desert. Nigel tried to glare at Giovanni, but he wasn't very good at facial expressions, so he just looked as though he had eaten a lemon. Clive was doing much better job of glaring and was shaking with fury from the effort. He shook so much that the friction created a hole in the carpet he was standing on. Giovanni pushed past Nigel and Clive to have a look at the awards list. When he saw that he was second, Giovanni got mad, then tripped Nigel over and stole his bag. Nigel looked on in dismay as his wallet, school books, and most importantly his hay fever tablets had disappeared. To make matters worse, it had begun to rain, and Nigel had to walk home. On his way home, Nigel caught a cold. He sneezed and sneezed, causing disintegration of many wet daisies.
Sorry.
Nigel began to worry, as this was the night before the graduation. How could he possibly go if he would sneeze the whole night? He then began to think of ideas to get rid of his cold. When he got home, Nigel tried everything from duct taping his nostrils closed to ancient rituals where he sat in a daisy-shaped pentagram and chanted. In the end, he overdosed on hay fever tablets, which he kept an abundant supply of in his cupboard. After a long and deep sleep, Nigel woke feeling absolutely awful. He took another hay fever tablet and got ready to go to school. Despite having a tablet, Nigel sneezed all the way to school, and this just made him feel worse. This was a dilemma Nigel did not need, and he walked through the school gates determined to hold any hint of a sneeze back with sheer willpower. Nigel was successful in this endeavor, and cheered up, thinking that he could make it through the graduation.
Ha-ha!
The graduation started out pleasantly, as Nigel and Clive got to a table themselves and discussed the benefits of offshore wind farms for an hour. Throughout all of this, Nigel did not sneeze one bit, and when it came time for his award speech, he felt he could conquer anything. Nigel walked up on stage and was about to begin his speech when he felt some tension in his nasal cavity.
Not now.
But it was too late. he uncontrollably sneezed right over the principal. The sneeze was so big that the recoil sent Nigel skidding backwards over the stage until he almost fell off the edge. The principal had worn his best wig for the occasion, on account of him being bald, and stood abruptly with one eye twitching in rage as his wig disintegrated thanks to Nigel's mucus. Nigel was glued to the spot, as someone had dropped a Pritt stick there during the sit-up. He gaped in horror at the principal. The principal regained his composure, then informed Nigel that he was banished from the school forever. The principal then announced to the crowd that Giovanni would be awarded ducks, much to the disgust of Darrell, who was a close third, and actually was a duck. Giovanni laughed evilly, and Nigel backed slowly out of the room. As Nigel walked away from the graduation, he kicked at the rubbish on the ground. After deciding that he needed to call his relatives and tell them the bad news, he realized that he had no money. Nigel wandered aimlessly for a while, until he remembered it was Thursday, and that meant late night shopping. So he walked until he found a lonely little paint shop. Nigel walked in and asked the man sitting behind the counter if he could borrow some money for a phone call. The man's hearing was apparently not very good, and his reply was,
Yes, you can have a job here. You can advertise paint.
Nigel decided to take his chances in the paint shop, seeing as nothing else was going right, and accepted the job. The man, who said his name was Alan, then told Nigel,
I see you have a hammer, but we don't sell nails here. There's a butcher down the road you could try, though. Yeah.
Nigel started work the very next day. A year went by, and Alan let Nigel move into the shop because he liked the way he worked. It wasn't what Nigel had hoped for, but Nigel had come to think of his life as all right. One day, Alan gave Nigel a newspaper for a present.
Ah, thanks very much, Alan.
What? There's camels in the paint? Yeah, I must investigate.
As Alan rapidly checked all the paint, Nigel sat down to read the paper. His eyes opened wide when he read a feature article about a successful parrot named Giovanni. Giovanni was living the high life now, literally. His most recent purchase was a mansion on top of a large hill. He had also bought himself a golden tooth. Nigel read the article with hatred, and that night threw the paper in the bin and lit it on fire to keep him warm. Nigel's life was now less than all right. He wished he didn't know about the success of his nemesis Giovanni. It was on that day that Nigel decided he must outdo Giovanni somehow. But that's another story.